Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to explore Chapter 2, Interpersonal Communication. This chapter is all about understanding what interpersonal communication is, why it matters, and the different components that make that happen. We'll also look at how perception shapes our communication and some of the models and skills that help us become stronger communicators. So, let's dive in. First, what is interpersonal communication and why do we study it? Interpersonal communication at its simplest form is communication sending and receiving messages with other people. It can be formal or informal, face-to-face, or mediated through technology, but it's always about exchanging personal experiences and information. And if you remember that key, interpersonal communication is with two people. Now, I want you to think about it. Every time you introduce yourself, check in with a friend, or even chat over text, you're practicing that interpersonal communication. And these interactions help us achieve both personal and professional goals. So, why do we need to communicate interpersonally? What about it is something that we need? Well, one way to understand this is through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is basically the pyramid you see right here. At the base of the pyramid, we communicate to meet physical and safety needs. Things like food, shelter, protection. But as you go up the hierarchy, as you go up that pyramid, communication helps us belong. It helps with esteem and even self-actualization. Now, it goes a lot deeper about this in your textbook, but basically we need to reach that to feel like ourselves. Interpersonal communication helps us reduce uncertainty about others. Berger and Calabrese's uncertainty reduction theory tells us that when we first meet someone new, we naturally want to predict their behavior and understand what to expect. That reduces our anxiety and helps us to connect. So, how do we actually get to know new people? That's a good question, right? There are three main strategies. The first one is passive strategies like observing, like noticing how someone behaves in class. There's active strategies, asking others about that person. Interactive strategies, directly engaging with that person. Along the way, self-disclosure, sharing that personal information plays a big role. And of course, we're also evaluating people. Do they meet our social expectations? Do we think we'll see them again? Are they likely to reward or punish us? How do we get to know new people is basically through uncertainty reduction theory that we mentioned. Basically, this means we eliminate the unknowns when we meet someone new. Think about the questions you ask when you meet someone new. What things do you ask about? You most likely ask about your family, your work, your hobbies. Hey, do you like this? We share things that are safe to get to know someone, and that helps us get a little bit deeper. But again, we won't go too deep. This is something we're going to explore in future chapters. Before we even go through that, we're going to break down the components of interpersonal communication through the communication process. The first here that you see on the screen is the linear process, or how the first studiers of communication thought communication would go. In communication with others, there's a sender of information. Before we send any information to someone, or before we send that message, we do something called encoding. We're thinking about what words are going to work best, such as those safe topics we talked about with uncertainty reduction. Then we choose the channel, such as the in-person versus face-to-face. There's texting through mediated, different ways we're going to communicate. Because believe it or not, you change the way you communicate based on that channel. The receiver then of that information. So imagine a conversation, you send information. Then you become the receiver, you're listening. As you get information from someone, you are decoding that message. We think about the environment we're in. Are you talking to someone at school? Are you talking to them at the grocery store? We think about that context. We also think about their body language the sender's giving. Are their arms crossed or are they smiling? And at that same time you're getting all this information, you're getting feedback. You're giving them a nod. You're giving them eye contact. You're giving communication. Now, obviously, the linear model shows what happens when perfect communication goes through. But have you ever had perfect communication where it goes in this perfect circle as you see, which means you've never been interrupted or had a quick conversation change? Me neither. That's why the transactional model fits a little bit better, if you ask me. Oh, it's not on my screen. But the transactional model basically is this big part where it has things coming into the conversation, where you're sending information at the exact same time that you're receiving information, and then you are giving feedback through your face. You're thinking about the noise and distractions around you. Basically, it's not a perfect circle. There's a lot going on and a lot that we think about as we talk to someone else. This leads us to the goal of our course, which is effective communication. Effective communication is things that you are sharing is being understood in the way you are intending. Have you ever had miscommunication where things you're sharing with someone like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to encode information. They're going to get the message and they're going to decode it right. Odds are probably not. A lot of times we struggle with this part of communication, which is why this course is required. The transactional model, which I'll share in class because that'll help, it really does a better job at interpersonal communication. It recognizes that people are both sending and receiving information at the same time. The other key element here is perception that I showed. Perception is how we acquire, interpret, and organize information through our senses. It's a continuous process shaped by our experiences and our preferences. It happens in 3 stages. The first stage here is attending, as you see on the screen. Attending is focusing on certain stimuli while ignoring others. You pay attention to things, how they feel, how they look, how they taste. You choose what to ignore, which means if you are talking with me and there's sounds going on, you're ignoring the sounds of, thunder or dogs barking. You're trying to be attending. You're paying attention to what matters. The second part here is organizing. You're making sense of what we see, what we hear. We're using categories like physical, role-based, social constructs. So if we're talking to someone, we're figuring out, we're organizing it in our head. What are we receiving informationally? And the last one here is interpret. We assign meaning to what we gather. We use our personal experiences, our personal expectations, and even past relationships to interpret what we're getting out of those messages. Basically, this all boils down to no two people perceive communication exactly the same way. You can see why that makes it so hard to communicate with other people. Our past experiences come in and we relate to things in different ways. Which is why, does it matter? Yes, this is how we become effective communicators. Now, the last part here is mindful communication. When you're talking to someone else, you're being mindful of listening, people skills, emotional intelligence, and these are what we'll cover in future chapters to really help with effective communication. The great communicators also value things like ethics, truthfulness, respect, fairness, and those are other things that we'll learn about as we go. But to wrap up this so that it's not too long of a lecture, interpersonal communication is how we build relationships. We reduce uncertainty and achieve personal and professional goals. It involves components like a sender, a receiver, those channels, that feedback, that noise. It's all influenced by our past, by our perceptions. Models help us understand better communication and how it works, and emotional intelligence, if you read in the textbook, helps us to do it a little bit better. But as we go, here's something to reflect on. In your own conversations, do you pay more attention to what people say, or is it how they say it? That awareness is the first step to becoming a stronger communicator, and that awareness will help you as we read future chapters to understand why we're learning what we do. We'll keep building on these foundations to see how they play out in more specific contexts.